Hey guys, it's me, Mr. 250, and welcome to Banshee's Last Cry. Now you might be asking, well, what is Banshee's Last Cry? Well, let me tell you. The version that we're playing here today in this slightly terrible vertical format on YouTube is the iOS version, the newest one that was ported to the iOS by Axes, the great people that brought us 999 with all of those great dialogue options. And just a little bit of backstory, Banshee's Last Cry is known in Japan as Kama Atachi no Yoru, which means Night of the Sickle Weasel. Now, it's actually been on a number of systems. It started out on the Super Famicom. It's been ported to the PlayStation, Game Boy Advance, PC, mobile phone, what we're doing now, and apparently the Virtual Console. I'm assuming in Japan, I've never seen it in our Virtual Console on the Wii and the Wii U. But apparently it's there, and this is the iOS version. That's me trying to prevent my phone from going to sleep. And yeah, we're just gonna kind of hop right into it. I have a couple things to say along the way, but for the most part we're just gonna be reading it, and it should be pretty interesting. We're gonna use stock names for this. Let you scroll through the story, and just tells you how to play it at the beginning. So, let's begin. Hopefully everything works well, by the way. I'm experimenting with the with an iPhone video recorder again, so we're gonna see if that goes well. It was my first time snowboarding, but somehow I'd managed to make it to the bottom of the hill, where I collapsed heavily in the snow. I'm exhausted. I turned to look back up the slope, just in time to see Grace expertly launching off of a jump into the air. Before I could even recover from my amazement at her acrobatics, she'd come to a stop right in front of me. "What's wrong? Tired already?" Grace took off her goggles and gave me an amused smile. "Yeah, pretty much," I said, looking up at her. Seeing her smile for the first time in hours was like watching the sun peering out from behind the clouds. She was wearing a blue checkered jacket and bright orange pants. With her long blonde hair flying everywhere as she pulled off trick after trick in the halfpipe, Grace had managed to attract the attention of nearly everyone on the slopes. They were all probably wondering if there was a beautiful face under those goggles. Snow gear covered up a lot. In Grace's case, though, I thought, it was true. It wasn't just her face that was so compelling either. I also knew that an incredible body was hiding underneath all those layers. Earlier, I'd been depressed by the way Grace, who had been raised up in the mountains, snowboarded circles around me, but now I was feeling proud. Grace looked at me smiling. "How about one more run?" "Huh? You want to keep going?" I was exhausted. We'd been on the slopes all morning, and I could barely stand up. "Oh, come on, just one more, okay?" she said, putting her hands together imploringly. Now, another thing I'd like to add, as you may have already noticed, this visual novel, it's actually called, they like to use the term sound novel, actually doesn't have any portraits of characters. In fact, the only thing that you see is, you see the text, you see backgrounds, and you hear music, which, they all work together fairly decently. Definitely goes well with the term sound novel. In fact, I believe, I'm actually reading it right now on their Wikipedia page, it was actually a registered trademark of Toonsoft. But it's now regarded as a whole genre of its own. But yeah, they apparently made the term for, this game. "Let's just head back already. Besides, those clouds look kinda suspicious," I said, pointing up at the sky. It was no lie. The sun, which had made an occasional appearance from behind the clouds, was now completely out of sight. "You're right. Looks like it might storm tonight," Grace said, pursing her lips. "Alright, let's call it a day." We piled our gear into the SUV we borrowed from the inn and headed back. I first met Grace in college back in April that year. I liked her from the very first time I laid eyes on her, and after a slow start, we finally fell into what you might call a dating relationship by autumn. But no matter how much I pushed, I never got more than lukewarm responses from her. I was doing all the work, so to speak, and it felt like she was just humoring me. So when she asked if I wanted to go snowboarding with her, I have to admit I was surprised. An overnight stay, no less. Naturally, I wanted desperately to go, But at the time, I was flat broke. Working on a contract basis wasn't easy. But when she saw me frown and open my mouth to sadly decline, Grace quickly told me not to worry about the cost. We could stay at an inn that her uncle owned for super cheap. She told me it was because the inn didn't have many customers, since it was a tad far away and inconvenient to the hill. With the way the economy had turned, I didn't think a ski trip was a very good idea. But between the surprise invite from Grace and the offer for a cheap room, I just couldn't say no. I told her I'd love to go, and so, on December 21st, we set out together for Dillon Ridge, British Columbia, in a night that would change both of our lives forever. Mystery abounds! By the time we arrived back at the inn, the sun had set and the snow had started to fall. The Snowflake Inn, run by Grace's uncle William Forrest and his wife, was an attractive inn with the outside done in a log cabin style, and the interior brightly decorated in shades of off-white. The menu was multicultural, or maybe I should say all over the map. But in any case, it was diverse and everything sounded delicious. Far from being in a slump, the inn had just been showcased in magazines and stuff, and was starting to get a lot of attention. Oop, went a little bit too far. Mr. Forrest had gone out about how he'd happily cut me a deal since business was slow anyway. But once we arrived, it was plain to me that he was just being kind to his niece. Unfortunately, although I guess I should have expected it, he'd given Grace and I separate rooms. We decided to... Now, like most visual novels, we get choices here. I don't want to spoil it, but let me just say that the more you play, the more the story changes, and not just in ways that you would think, in different ways, and it's really cool for that. Now, I'm going to go for the route that gets us, pretty darn far into the story, just so you kind of get a good first look into the story, and then after that we can go for some of the other routes. I plan on doing a full playthrough, by the way. It's, well, I want to do all the routes. I don't think it'll take more than 15 episodes, so maybe a month. But it is a good story, and all the other routes are either interesting or humorous, to say the least. So we're gonna head to our rooms to change, then meet up in the lounge. The lounge consisted of a big brown coffee table surrounded by sofas. We decided to sit there and wait until dinner. I didn't think it'd be this far from the hill. The source of that whiny complaint was a beach blonde girl with heavy makeup. Caked under layers of foundation, eyeliner, and mascara, it was hard to imagine what she might have really looked like. My first guess was that she had headed up from Los Angeles. Maybe even Beverly Hills. But the food's supposed to be amazing. See, it says so right here. The girl, pointing to a page in the travel guide she was carrying, was wearing an overly frilly, almost doll-like pink dress, and had a bag of potato chips tucked under her arm. She was a little overweight, but her makeup was skillfully applied, and she had a cute enough look to her. That's why I didn't want to leave it up to you, Debbie. Like, if you just wanted good food, you could have gone to any of a million places in LA, right? Jeez. The beach blonde girl snapped angrily back at her. Another girl stepped in to calm things down, a role that it looked like she was used to by this point. Alright, look, the atmosphere isn't bad or anything, right? A place like this probably has better service too. She wore glasses, and her brown hair was cut in a bob. Fresh-faced, without a lick of makeup. She had dark brown pants and a beige hoodie. She looked just like a hipster from Seattle. So, which one do you like best? Grace whispered frostily in my ear. What do you mean? I wasn't looking at them like that. With Grace right next to me, I wasn't at all interested in any other girls. Maybe I should have said that to her, but I couldn't work up the courage. Hey, could you, take a picture of us? The hipster girl with the glasses asked me, holding out her phone. Sure, no problem, I said, taking the phone from her. I didn't mind taking the photo, but I've always had a pet peeve about people who do the whole say cheese thing. 1, it's a stupid phrase, and 2, it never even works like it's supposed to. I guess the idea is to try to get people to smile on the chee part. But if you're a second too late with the shutter, you'll wind up with people pouting like a fish. If you're gonna do it, why not make them say Kiwi or TV or something? But I was too embarrassed to ask people I didn't know to say anything anyway, so I just kept my mouth shut. Trying not to let my thoughts show, I held up the phone. Beach blonde, doll girl, and hip chick put on their best smiles. Ready? Here goes. I snapped the photo. Thanks a bunch. She took her phone back, and all the three girls gave me little smiles. The ice broken, we struck up some idle conversation. The girl that was complaining about the distance from the hill was named Tiffany Oakley. The girl in the dress munching on the bag of snacks was Debbie Mason, and the bob cut hipster with the glasses was Molly Starks. All three of them were 21 years old, and doing temp work in the same company. We just got here. How is the snow? Tiffany asked me. Since it was my first day snowboarding, I really had no basis for judging if it was good or bad. Thankfully, Grace answered for me. Pretty good. The lifts weren't crowded either. Not wanting to seem less knowledgeable than Grace, Tiffany started going on about snowboard brands and so forth. The other two listened to her talk, looking somewhat bored. It was starting to look like Tiffany might have dragged them here. Just then, we heard the sound of a car engine approaching and stopping behind the inn. It seemed like some new guest had arrived. After a short while, the bell attached to the foyer door rang just as a voice boomed out in a strong Texas accent. Dang, we nearly got buried alive out there. A man and a woman entered the inn, heads and shoulders covered in snow. The man, short and with muscles that had long since gone to fat, mostly to fat, he looked to be around 50. The woman was tall and thin and appeared to be in her late 30s. Chase Buchanan! Well, I'm glad you made it in. I was getting worried. Mr. Forrest bustled in from the back to greet the two new arrivals. It's snowing like the bejesus out there. We done nearly got ourselves lost. I looked out the window and saw that the snow, which was falling fairly lightly before, had picked up quite a bit. The antique cuckoo clocks on the wall announced that it was 7 o'clock. Reflexively, I looked at my phone and it said 6:55 p.m. I guess the clock was a little fast. Dinner's ready, so if you all would like to come to the dining room, said a voice. It was Abby McCarthy, a part-time staffer at the inn, emerging from the back. You can go on in, Mr. and Mrs. Buchanan. I'll take your coats and luggage to your room. After having them sign the guest registry, Mr. Forrest led the Buchanans into the dining room. I happened to be looking in that general direction, and, for a moment, Miss Buchanan and I locked gazes briefly. She has sad eyes. The thought crossed my mind so briefly that I barely had time to register it. She smiled at me, dipping her head slightly as she did. Somewhat flustered, I did the same. I noticed that Grace was looking at her too. At first, I thought that she was going to make another sarcastic remark about me, leering at other women, so I was surprised when I heard her say softly, "Beautiful, isn't she?" Well, I feel like if we're trying to win Grace over here on this lovely romantic ski trip, we probably shouldn't go quite for the desperate route of, "Not as much as you, Grace." So, yeah, I answered honestly. She looks so attractive and sophisticated, you know? Grace asked me, a serious look on her face. Well, you're attractive. In your own way. In my own way? What's that supposed to mean? Pouting, Grace quickly stood up and marched off into the dining room. It looked like I hadn't chosen my words very wisely. I hurried up after her. The table in the dining room had its place settings all laid out. The three young ladies and the older couples were already sitting down. I chose the spot next to Grace and took a seat. In the center of the table stood a Christmas tree-shaped candle. Its flickering flame lent a soft, warm glow to Grace's face as she stared out the window. And I have a feeling after that failed compliment to her, in your own way, we probably shouldn't immediately go for the, "You look sexy," because I'm pretty sure we're going to get shot down. So let's try with the, "You look beautiful," I said smoothly, in what I hoped was a suave and sophisticated way. That was the idea, at least. But in reality, I was way too self-conscious to try out a line like that, so I just stared at her. Why are you staring off into space like that? Are you that hungry? Another chance blown, I suppose. Miss Forrest, Colleen, carried the food to the table alongside Abby, the part-timer. The only guests were the three girls, the married couple that came in late, and Grace and I. Or so I thought at first glance. But I then noticed another person sitting there. Someone that looked completely out of place at the inn. Spooky music! The man with the coat was sitting at the far end of the table, as if he was trying to melt into the wall behind him. Not only had he not removed his coat and hat before starting to eat, he'd even left on his black sunglasses. He certainly didn't look like he was here for the skiing, but he didn't project the vibe of being here on business either. In fact, the first impression I had was that he had to be part of the mob. Now let's just think here for a second. If he was in fact part of the mob, should we blurt out, "What's that Mafia Guy doing here?" Or, more likely, we should probably go with the, "You think he's in the Mafia?" I asked Grace. Hey, it's rude to stare like that. Besides, why would a mob guy come to a ski lodge by himself? That was a good point. And you'll notice through this, obviously, it was localized by the same people that did 999, so it kind of has the Junpei effect of having the main character have Junpei-like qualities at times, and I really like it. It is quite interesting. And just in terms of stuff like this, like he'll say dumb things sometimes, and it's funny. Maybe he's a really nice guy despite that vibe of his, I thought to myself as I watched him quietly eating his soup. Maybe he left his sunglasses on because he's shy. Or maybe they're prescription sunglasses for skiing or something. Whatever the reason was, I forgot about him as soon as they brought our food. "This is great," Grace said after trying a spoonful of soup. It was chicken soup broth packed with vegetables. I swallowed a mouthful and felt the warmth spreading through my body. Everything that came out afterwards was just as good. From time to time, I could hear little sighs of happiness coming from the other guests. This food could have come from a top-class restaurant, I thought. Who would have expected it from this tiny little inn? It then occurred to me that the mafia-looking guy and the middle-aged couple had probably come here just for the food. "Did your aunt cook all of that?" I asked Grace over our after-dinner coffee. No way. Grace comically shook her head back and forth. I know I shouldn't say this, but my aunt is a horrible cook. She looked around, and then continued on in a quiet voice. My uncle's the one who loves to cook. He told me he wanted to become a chef since he was a kid. Yeah? Mm-hmm. He wound up listening to his parents instead, and became a lawyer, but he never gave up on his dream. After my uncle and aunt found out that they couldn't have kids, he decided to leave the practice and open this inn. So we could say that must have been really tough, or we can call him an idiot, which probably doesn't work well in terms of trying to win her favor over, especially after our more or less thoughtless comments. It sure was, but it just so happened that my grandfather, my mother's father that is, owned a few of the mountains around here. So that way he had some land to begin with. That made things a lot easier, I guess. Wow. So your family's pretty rich, huh? I asked, feeling pretty self-conscious about my own pathetic finances. Oh, not at all. Pretty much all of the land went to my mom's older sister. My mom's older brother. My dad just got some regular job in an office. And our house is really small too, answered Grace. I was relieved to hear that we weren't in completely different social classes, at least. The guests that were done with dinner started to leave. My digital watch read 7:55 p.m. So, how about a couple of night runs? Grace stunned me by asking as we stood up to leave ourselves. You're kidding, right? We can't snowboard at night in this weather. From what I heard on the weather report, this is no time to be night skiing. Abby, clad in an apron, saved me from further embarrassment by cutting in. You probably shouldn't even leave the inn right now. It was hard to tell Abby McCarthy's true age. She was likely around 30, but sometimes she looked like she was in her teens. and sometimes she looked quite a lot older. I guess she probably spent all her free time outdoors, because her face was tanned and leathery from the sun, like you see with the hardcore ski bums around here. Oop, sorry. It's that bad? I asked, my relief struggling for supremacy over my concern. Oh yes. The report said it might be a blizzard like we haven't seen in years. The other part-time worker, Bobby Trotter, approached us. Bobby was an instructor who used to spend most of the winters on the slopes, teaching beginners and intermediates how to snowboard. Thanks to some past connection or another, he now split his time working here at the inn as well. He was about 6 feet tall and, in addition to being an expert snowboarder, had the kind of build that suggested that he was pretty good at a lot of other sports too. His suntan was the mere image of Abby's. Being around guys like this always made me feel inadequate, especially when I was with a girl. I glanced over at Grace to see her reaction. Her pupils hadn't magically turned to heart symbols, and her tongue wasn't hanging out of her mouth, so I had that going for me anyway. We won't die of starvation here, will we? I asked. Bobby let out a chuckle. You don't have to worry about that. We're pretty far from town, so we always stayed pretty well stocked. If we went through all of our canned stuff too, we could probably keep everyone here fed for 3 weeks. Cooped up in this inn for 3 weeks? I didn't even want to think about that. But on second thought, if I was here with Grace, maybe it wouldn't be so bad after all. I looked over at her, my imagination conjuring up a number of pleasant scenarios. Good job, Max. Something you need? Oh, nothing. This won't be any kind of 3-week storm, but I don't think it'll be safe to go outside on the roads tomorrow, Bobby said regretfully. Oh well. School's on break now anyway, so I don't suppose staying an extra 2 or 3 days will be too much of a problem, eh? I guess not, Grace replied. It's up to my uncle. Still, I don't think he'd mind letting us stay here another day or so. That'll be okay, right, Max? Huh? Oh yeah, sure, I replied with a smile. I was scheduled for work in 2 days, but I couldn't turn down a chance like this either. Just as I was thinking about what sorts of sparks could be flying between us after a few days snowed in with Grace, the 3 girls came running in. Mr. Forrest went up to them to see what the problem was. Clearly very upset about something, the 3 girls I chatted with earlier were waving their hands frantically as they confronted Mr. Forrest. Alright, just slow down and relax. What exactly happened? Like I told you, we got back to our room and this was there. The girls were shaking as they handed a scrap of paper to Mr. Forrest. From where I was, I could see something written on it in red marker. Uh-oh. Tonight at midnight equals death. Tonight at midnight equals death? I read the message aloud. Everyone in the room gasped. It took a few seconds for Mr. Forrest to recover enough to respond. It must be some kind of prank. Well, it's not a very funny one. She was right. It certainly was nasty. Assuming it was a prank at all, that is. But who could have gone into our room and put that there? I'm so freaked out. I'm like never gonna get to sleep tonight, Tiffany said, her face all twisted up like she was about to cry. Well, if it was on the floor, they could have just slipped it under the door. Your room was locked, right? Asked Mr. Forrest. The 3 girls paused as they thought about it. Finally, Tiffany responded, That's true. They didn't have to go inside at all. Apparently the scenario hadn't occurred to them. Well, it's still creepy, Molly, the girl with the glasses said. If you'd like, I'd be happy to change your room. We have another one open right now. Does that one have internet access too? Mr. Forrest shook his head. I'm afraid not. Sorry. Usually we don't offer the internet in any of our other rooms. Huh? Why not? Well, a lot of our guests appreciate being off the grid while they're here. The room you're in now is a special one, meant for business travelers. That's the only one with a connection, so if you need access, I'm afraid you'll have to stay there. What should we do? The 3 girls began to talk it out amongst themselves. Well, like I said, it creeps me out, said Molly. So, should we, forget about going online? Asked Tiffany. What? Come on, I need to talk to my friends. Debbie sounded like a teenager complaining to her parents. Who cares about your stupid online friends? Why did you come here anyway? I came for a dose of reality. Reality! I could see that Tiffany was starting to lose it. Yeah, I know, but... we can't even use their cell phones here. I apologize about that, but like I said, many of our guests... Mr. Forrest, sounding increasingly uncomfortable, stopped mid-sentence. Debbie wasn't listening anyway. Oh no, I just remembered. I absolutely have to go online tonight. I promised everyone we would make Sabrina cry in SS11. Oh god, you're playing that game? Tiffany sounded shocked. I've never played it myself, but I've heard about it. SS11 was an online game that was very popular among a cultish group of players. The SS stood for Savage Sadist. Doesn't that sound like a great game to play with the kids? Savage Sadist. And it was famous for its ultra brutality and gore. After they calmed down a little, the three girls decided the message must have been a stupid prank and not worth changing rooms over. They all left and went back to their original room. I wonder who would have pulled such a nasty joke, though. There aren't any kids staying here. Grace turned towards me with a mischievous look on her face. Any chance it was you, Max? That's not funny, Grace. Why would I even do that to some girls I don't even know? I replied in surprise. Yeah, I guess you're right. Not even you would do something like that. I didn't exactly care for the way she put that retort, but I let it slide. And that's where we're going to leave it off. So hopefully, if you're watching this, that means that the video recording was successful. Yay, we can do this more. The story, it's definitely an interesting story, and I like it a lot just because it has a lot of stuff in it. And oh yeah, another thing I wanted to say. There's going to be a point where they will ask me a specific question about the story, and I have to type it in, with a keyboard on my phone, what the answer is. Now, the problem is I already know the answer to that, because I've already played through this entire game. But if I happen to stumble across that path by accident, like too early in the game, I'm going to purposefully answer it wrong, so that I don't, I don't get the ending. It's too early. Look at me now, I'm stuttering. I should probably end the video, but I hope you guys enjoyed. It's definitely a good game, and if you guys enjoy it, please let me know, because it does take a bit of work to set up, but if people are enjoying it, I would be more than happy to do. Anyway, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time for more Banshee's Last Cry. Bye!